So welcome back to the 20th edition of the Ohio Bass Podcast. I'm your host, Nick. You can follow me on Twitter at Ohio_Bass, on Instagram at Ohio_Bass_outdoors, on TikTok or Snapchat at Ohio_Bass, or you can always email the show at theohiobasspodcast@gmail.com. We have a really awesome guest this week. He's a person I met for the first time down at ICAST. We were both a part of the American tackle team.
Recognize.
He grew up in New Jersey. He's a multi-species angler. I had a hard time this week coming up with questions because the guy catches everything. I really wanted to zero in on a certain species of fish, but after reviewing his account, he's catching trout, he's catching largemouth bass, he's catching pike, he's catching stripers in the ocean. So in the beginning of the interview, we kind of cover different seasons, about how we approach, different time frames of the year, what species we go after and why. And then we get a little sidetracked. We both start talking about bass fishing. Bass fishing, mainly using jerkbaits. So it turns out his favorite way to fish for bass is jerkbaits, which is also mine. I wanted to bring this up during the interview, but that's usually the guest's time to talk. And I have this whole open where I can talk about my reaction to the interview. So my favorite jerkbait is a Rapala X-Rap XR10. The things are the perfect size. The main reason I like them, well, there's two main reasons. The casting distance, I haven't found another jerkbait on the market where I can cast as far as this. Casting distance for me is one of the main things for jerkbait fishing. You need that distance. You need to cover a lot of water. Typically when people are using jerkbaits, they're search baits. So if you're not getting a casting distance, you're limiting the amount of water that you're trying to attempt to explore every single cast. The second thing is the action. Now the action for this size jerkbait, I don't know how they engineered this, whether it was an accident. It's unbelievable. So one of my favorite things to do when I get a new bait, and I recommend this to everybody at every age level. You get a bait, you just drop it in the water right in front of you, and you see how that bait works in the water. You want to paint a mental picture of what that bait is doing underneath the water. So when you give that the real cast, when it's out there in open water, you know exactly how it looks. You know what it looks like when it pauses. You know exactly how far it darts. So you can change up your cadence and you actually have complete control of that bait under the water. The Rapala X-Rap, in my opinion, I know it's kind of one of the most popular ones. You can find them at Walmart. You can find them at any tackle shop across the United States. But maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's because they are the best, in my opinion. I have every single color. I actually started getting double and triple of every single color just to keep. God forbid they go off the market one day. You can't find them anymore. Maybe on eBay for triple the amount you could have bought one, when they were in stock. So I have a whole pile of baits just hanging up on my workbenches that perhaps I'll never use, but I know I'll have them. It's almost to the point where, if you look at this, it almost looks like I collect fishing lures. And maybe I do. Maybe I do collect them subconsciously. One other interesting thing about the interview, which I didn't really think about until after I listened to it again and started to edit this thing. He brought up the fact that it doesn't really matter what bait you use. If you are an angler, you'll still be able to catch fish. And I thought about that last night. And that is such a true statement. I remember, well, let's look at it this way. Look at how many baits that you have in your tackle box and compare that to how many you had last year or 2 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago, depending on how long you were fishing. Look at how many baits you have that you never use. All right, that's the first talking point. Circle back around. The second one is, I remember growing up, I only had 4 baits. And they weren't 4 jerk baits. I had 1 jerk bait and 3 other plugs. And I would catch fish with that 1 jerk bait in any condition, any pond, any river. I only had 1 option. That's what I used. I remember getting a little older, buying the bottom of the barrel jerk baits at Walmart. The ones that didn't even qualify to get hung up. They were just all thrown in the box at the bottom. They're $1, maybe $1.50. I'd pick some of those up. I'd paint them with markers. I caught fish with those baits. Cheap hooks, cheaply made. Didn't matter. I didn't need a $10 jerkbait. I didn't need a $25 jerkbait from Japan to catch bass. So think about that. Think about how many baits that you have in your tackle box that you never use, that you pick up at a show, something new comes out, new colors, new body styles, you get one, you throw it in there, it doesn't immediately work. What happens? What happens to that bait? Do you put it up? How many times do you use that bait before you think, it's not working? How many times do you go back to your go-to plug? How many times do you go back to the bait that maybe you instantly had good success with? So mentally, you have such confidence in that bait that you're just going to continually go back to that certain bait, that certain technique, that certain color that you know works or has worked in the past. Now, thinking about it, do the other baits not work? How did they get mass produced if they don't work? Maybe you catch the most fish on the baits that you have confidence in because you use them the most, because they're in the water 3 times more than some of the other baits that are in your tackle box. So it's really interesting to think about it. Like if you give an angler a 1 or 2, I guess I'll put it this way. If you give Kevin Van Dam a $1.50 jerkbait, do you think he's not going to catch fish? That would be such an interesting TV show where you bring on one of these Major League Fishing pros. You give them the cheapest tackle. You give them bottom of the barrel Walmart gear. See how they compete then. See, I bet, I'm willing to bet that they will still crush it with inferior tackle. All right. So last week I asked the question, does anybody know a better way to record phone interviews for the podcast? And I did have somebody write me. His name is Zach, if you're listening. I appreciate that advice. He was very thoughtful and thorough with his response. I did tell him, like I said last week, if you reach out to me and give me some advice, that I'll mail you some tackle. So Zach, if you want to give me an address, a P.O. box or something, I will definitely mail you some baits. That's a whole nother part of the show is interaction. And I will tell you that last week's episode was by far the most listened to and downloaded podcast up to date. So thank you, Jared, for coming on, JRod_Outdoors. He absolutely crushed it. We had such good feedback on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. We had a lot of interactions, a lot of people talking about it. So definitely heading in the right direction. So no product review this week, but I do want to give a quick shout out to a company called Liquid Mayhem.
Recognize.
Last week, Jared and I talked about how important scent comes into play when fishing for trout. Well, that's exactly what Liquid Mayhem makes. Fish attractant for every species, saltwater and freshwater. They use real ingredients like minnows and crayfish. They grind it up, they put it in a paste. It stays on your bait to up to 40 casts. They also have one of the best taglines in fishing. Some days are easy, for others, use Liquid Mayhem. And I can't vouch for that enough. How many times I've been on the water, the conditions are bad, I'm getting skunked, I put on some Liquid Mayhem, and then boom, I get my first hit. So definitely, everybody check out liquidmayhem.com. That's about all I have for an open. I can't really think of anything else, so we'll dial up the interview. Again, I appreciate everybody for listening. And with that being said, let's hit it.
What have I got?
Let's head to the hotline presented by Deeper Sonar. Head to deepersonar.com to pick up your trophy bundle. So today, I'm really excited to bring on a super fascinating guy. I first met him down at ICAST. We were both invited by American Tackle. He is a multi-species angler with a ton of experience. His name is Gen Wong. Gen, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, how you doing, Nick? Good talking to you, man.
I'm doing good. Super excited about this. When I first met you down at ICAST, I noticed right away that you're a very interesting guy. You are a multi-species angler. You have years of experience. You have a great presence on social media. You're very involved in the fishing community. You've been going to ICAST for years. So in the beginning, I always ask guests to introduce themselves, kind of give us a background about, where you're from, how you grew up fishing, what you grew up fishing for, and I would just kind of leave it open-ended for you.
Okay, that's cool. Real easy. Been fishing a long time. I'm 64. I've been fishing since I was 5 years old. My older brother taught me how to fish. I started fishing. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, which is like an urban area. Actually, the riots were there in the 60s. I grew up during that. I grew up fishing in like ponds and parks and lakes. And then, of course, expanded my horizons later when my brother got the drive and all that. But I've been honing my skills ever since. Every time I go fishing, I learn something new, or I try to learn something new.
Yeah, of course. And that's a great way to approach it. So when I was thinking of questions on how to conduct this interview, I was reviewing your Instagram account, and you were catching so many different species of fish, it was hard for me to kind of identify one just to focus on. So maybe we can do this. Maybe we can kind of break down seasonally what kinds of fish that you fish for and why you fish for them during those times.
Okay, that's fair. What I do is I fish by seasons, time of year, what will bite at that time.
Yeah.
What the main chances of catching not just catching fish, but catching good sized fish. That's where the years and years and years of fishing comes into play, the experience. Like this time of year, I've been fishing trout, but I've been catching those. I kill those, but this time of year now, everything. But by time of year is the weather. Yeah. Right now, we're having a mild winter here in the Northeast, the Atlantic region where I am. New Jersey. So everything's a little bit ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
Like what I'm catching fish now, like big pike and pickerel, and all these other species that usually bite, like starting the end of February, maybe March, depending on weather conditions. And this is what I fish, is what I call the pre-spawn feed, and that's freshwater. And what that means is every species, and in most of the lakes, always have patterns of feeding habits. Well, they all take turns. They all don't spawn. They all don't feed at the same time. What I target is what bites best. So I know early on the first fish to come up, like from rivers and reservoirs into feeding right after ice, are like pickerel and pike. And that's the time of year. The pre-spawn feed is when you will catch the largest of each species. Yeah. I've caught close to state record, if not state record, pike, pickerel, everything. Bass, largemouth, smallmouth, whatever it is, because they're all coming up. The pre-spawn feed is they'll come up and look to actively feed and get fat so they can go spawn and make nests and have babies. So over the years, I figured out the time, and that's how I target my freshwater fishing.
All right. Well, let's talk about early in the year, January, February. What are you looking at now?
Well, usually around here, January, February, we got ice. And see, that's the only thing weird about me. I don't do ice.
Yeah.
And that's when I take a break.
Yeah.
That's when I do my gear. That's when I make my jigs, tie my flies, make my saltwater jigs. I pour all that. That's when I take the break. That's the only time I get a break. But this year I'm not getting a break. But this week we got weather coming, some pretty severe weather, so that's going to put a damper on it. Okay. But yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, that's fair. So in Ohio it gets super cold, but it never really gets cold enough for consistent, safe ice year after year, so I don't really ice fish either. But I will tell you, it starts gearing up March, April, May, leading into the spawn. How do you approach that time?
Okay, April, May, and June. By that time, traditionally, it's all weather dependent. The pickerel and the pike are gone. They're all gone to their mating and their nest building and all that. But then you have the other species that come up: crappies, they'll start same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're all egg laden. They're all looking to feed up heavy, and then so they can go spawn. Oh, and they also know all the bait, like all the bait, the small bait or the stuff they eat is active, and they're going after it. Then the largemouth, and then traditionally right after, or sometimes at the same time, smallmouth will be active in the same areas. Like I'll fish rivers that go into large impoundments, like reservoirs.
Yeah.
That channel into there, and that's prime feeding area. And so that's a couple of my spots. They know they come up there in the spring, pre-spawn feed, and they'll eat. They'll eat herring. They'll eat all the stuff that's coming down from the rivers. And it's a bonanza. And like I said, you'll catch the largest. You got a better chance of catching the biggest of the species, each species, at that time of year.
All right. So can you tell our audience exactly where your favorite fishing spots are and what to use so they can all go there?
Yeah, no, that I can't do.
I'm kidding.
Okay. You got me. Yeah.
All right. Let's move into summertime. The dog days of summer. The days are long. It's incredibly hot. How do you approach this?
Same thing. When it starts to get hot, that's when I start to filter off, because, like, everything's starting. The fresh water should be starting to spawn. I don't fish beds. I don't do that. It's like I just don't do that. To me, that's not fishing. I don't know. And people love that. Even tournaments, I don't do that. So anyway, I saltwater fish as well, and that's when I start saltwater fishing. It's either stripers, like fluke starts coming in, whatever the saltwater fish is. That's when I start doing that, and that's when I get heavy into the lure making, the jig, the pouring of the lead, making jigs and all that, and preparing for the saltwater season. And we also fish. That's mainly the only tournaments that I fish now anymore. I don't fish the freshwater tournaments anymore. I fish mostly saltwater tournaments. Okay. And they're for fluke. Some of them are for stripers, but, And like in the spring, too, I mean, I do some trout tournaments, but they're local and they're small. But I just do that for fun.
So we have a hybrid striped bass in Ohio, but they don't grow nearly as large as a traditional striped bass. I would love to go ocean fishing for striped bass. It's something that's on my bucket list. Could you quickly break down how you approach fishing for striped bass?
Okay. It's real easy, and again, it's predicated on time of year. They're coming in from wherever they were, they wintered, and now they're coming in to look to eat. And again, it's the pre-spawn feed. They come up to eat like mad, and then go up rivers and have their babies. So what we do is, I target them with, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't fish with bait, live bait.
Yeah.
I'm total artificial, mostly, yeah. I mean, I'll tip a jig in salt water with a piece of squid or something like that, but other than that, it's all jigs and gulp and, I use a lot of scents, gel scents, freshwater and saltwater. And, what in the what we mainly do, we'll troll until we find them. And if we see them on the screen, like that deeper sonar,
recognize.
We'll use the bigger sonar. That's on the boat. And once we find them, then we'll drop jigs down or big spoons. But we'll troll what there's called mojo rigs, and they're double mojo rigs. The ones I like are Tony Maja.
Okay.
And it's a big rubber. It looks like a bunker, but you troll two of them on each rod, and one's a low and one's a long high.
Okay.
They're called mojo rig. And when I tell you, it's the most insane fishing there is when you find them. Yeah. I mean, we'll troll two rods. There's two lures on each rod.
Yeah. And
you'll troll them. And when you go and get into a school of fish that are feeding, you catch 4 at a time. We had one day this past fall run while they were on the way out, because they're feeding up, leaving to go to where wherever they go. We caught 40 in less than 3 hours.
Oh.
40 stripers up to like 40 pounds. You know, they go from like 15 to 40 pounds. And when you look at your sonar, it's covered.
Really?
Yeah, it's insane.
So when you're trolling the baits, how big are the baits? How long are they? How many inches long?
10 inches at least.
Okay.
Some of them are 10. And you're trolling 2 of them. They got feathers. They got feathers, hair, and you know, it's like a big giant, like a swim bait in freshwater, but like giant size. So, yeah, and the spoons are like 8 to 10 inches, and they're huge. They're big. They're like how can I explain it? They're really big. 10 inches, a big spoon.
So I don't know if you remember, but I actually commented on one of your pictures about how big that spoon was. I didn't even think it was real. So we kind of do the same thing for muskie where we're trolling really, really large baits. We don't typically catch, 40 of them a day. We get 1, maybe 2 if we're super lucky. Do you ever fish for muskie?
Yeah, they do, but you know what? I've never caught a big one. I'm admittedly not a good muskie fisherman. I'll catch their cousins, the pike and the pickerel. Mm-hmm. But I've only caught small muskies, tiny ones.
I do have to call you out on something. I don't see any catfish or carp on your Instagram account.
You know what? I don't target them anymore. I used to target them like when my boys were growing up. So that's when I had to fish with bait. Yeah. But I still have bycatches, channel cap, because I use a lot of jerk bait. And as most everybody knows, the channel cats are very aggressive, and they also eat a lot of minnows, unlike, say, bullhead and stuff like that. I caught like 10, 12 pounders. They're choking on a jerk bait, but they have small eyes; they can't see. Yeah. So you don't catch a lot of them. Now carp, same thing. That's another smart fish. You got to use bait to catch them, and I'm not that. I can't sit there and like wait for a bite. I got to be using a lure, and they won't bite it. The only time I've caught them, I've caught 30 pounders, but snagging them on a jerk bait by accident. Again, in the spring, a lot of these places, the carp will come up, and I guess they're mating. I don't know what they're doing. They're mating, and like you'll snag one. If you're lucky enough to get your lure back, if you snag one, the scale, you come back with a scale, it's the size of a $50.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a monster fish. But most of the time, you snag one good, you ain't getting your lure back, and he's going to spool you.
Yeah, I've caught a lot of catfish accidentally on the jerkbait. They attack it. People think catfish are slow. They just wait for the bait to die and sink to the bottom, but they are super aggressive fish. I have a jerkbait question. I'll circle back around to it later, but I want to get to finish up this seasonal thing. So during the end of the year, when it start getting cold, winter's coming, what do you target then? And you guys get the shad run in the river like we do. We get small shad and large shad.
Exactly. During it, we had heavy rains down here, and it must have overflowed the creek into one of the impoundments that I fish that normally didn't have any what they call gizzard shad. Mm-hmm. But I snagged some. I'm going, what are these things doing here? But the bass were trying to eat them. They were all around us. So I was catching bass. I think that was in, I forget what month, a couple months, a week ago. But again, yeah, they're so thick, you can't get away from them. It's crazy.
Yeah, I keep snagging them too. When I fish for trout, they come in so thick. They're almost packed in there like firewood. I know the trout are still there underneath them, so you need to float your fly underneath the billions and billions of shad. But yeah, I don't get it. The big ones and the small ones.
Right. Well, what's good about that is what I took advantage of that. I didn't get no really big bass, but I knew bass was going to be around them because I caught a couple of them. If on a cast that I could avoid snagging these things because it's so thick. Like you said, it's been crazy. But I got a couple 2-3 pounders, 3.5 pounders maybe. It was fun. But you snag one of those big gizzard shads, that's fun too. They fight like mad.
All right, so I'll get to my jerkbait question. So I see that you use jerkbaits all the time, and my favorite way to fish for bass are jerkbaits. My favorite lure of all time is the Rapala X-Wrap, and I see that you use the Shadow Wrap, which is one of the newer models. And I didn't like the Shadow Wrap. I don't think it weighs enough. So why would you prefer the Shadow Wrap over the X-Wrap?
Because it's suspending, and I could make it move how I want it to move.
Okay.
I mean, I have a whole thing to jerkbait. I don't use it like you know how to use a jerkbait, right? Most people use a jerkbait, but there are people out there that they think you just reel it in. It's not like that. The way I do it is, I'll cast it out, and I know the target area where fish should be. And depending on time of year, again, I use jerkbait all year. With most guys, even some of these pros, oh, you're never going to catch nothing, and I catch fish. But time of year, you change how you work it. Now, like this time of year, I'll cast it out, and I'll let it sink for a couple seconds, and this is where the suspending part comes in against the X-Wrap. Mm-hmm. And depending on if I'm like at a tidal creek or the river, if I got moving water where it's going to sweep it down, I'll let it go down to where I wanted the depth is. I'll jerk it like I'm going crazy. People look at me, but they never seen me fish before. The ones that don't know me, they say, man, there's something wrong with that guy. But the violent initial jerk with the rattles inside, if it has rattles, or I'll put a rattle on, whatever, and the flash, and then I'll let it sit. Because if there's fish in the area, they'll see that, the commotion, and that'll, and plus with, I put lip glue on it, which is a scent. Mm-hmm. And I put it on there, and it's like gel, and it lasts for cast and cast. But either way, that leaves a scent trail. But the initial violent jerk will get, if there's fish there, it will get their attention. They'll see it. And then with the suspending part of the Shadow Wrap, you could just let it sit. And this time of year, that's what you got to do. Sometimes it's like painful to wait. You just let it sit, but then next thing you know, they're yanking the rod out of your hand.
So my biggest gripe with the Shadow Wrap is its casting ability. I don't know if it just doesn't weigh enough or it's not weighted correctly, but I can't get that. I can't get the casting distance that I can get out of the X-Wrap. And in jerkbait fishing, it's really important to me to get that bait as far out as possible.
Yeah, well, the X-Wrap is heavier, also sinks more. Yeah. Now think of it. If you want to stay in the zone and you want to be suspended, and the spring or right like now, you want to stay in the zone. The X-Wrap will go down, and it'll just keep going down. The suspension is what kills the fish. Because then they'll look at it. They'll come up and look at it. I mean, if you fish this time of year over here with me, right? Yeah. You'll bring it in. You could bring it in slow or fast, but you'll see them follow it, but they won't eat it. So most of my fishing, my lure fishing, is based on triggering a response. Yeah. Or what they call a reaction bite. Yes, sir! Which makes them bite. It makes them. I caught a bass that had a tail hanging out of its mouth, and it still ate my jerkbait because I made him eat it. I somehow made it eat it. I pulled that tail out. It was a 10-inch perch of a largemouth bass. 10-inch perch, and he was still hungry enough or responded to the way I was working my jerkbait to eat something else.
Yeah, the reaction strike is my favorite way to go. And I tell people all the time, there are two types of bites in bass fishing. There's a reaction strike and there's a hunger strike. The reaction strike, the bass is hitting that out of pure instinct. It can't not hit that bait. It sees it, the movement, it's going fast, boom, nails it. The hunger strike is where you're using your finesse baits, the plastic worms and such, and they're going to bite that lure because they are hungry. So because of that, I stopped using scent on my reaction strike baits like crankbaits and jerkbaits, but it looks like you continue to still put it on there. Am I making a mistake by not adding scent?
I use scent year-round. It doesn't hurt. As you know, you're a fisherman. You want to up the odds. Yeah. And any advantage, like I said, When I'm jerking it through the water, I'll cast to an area, and I'll cast to the same area again. I know I left scent in that area. I even use it like when I'm fishing for trout, everything. Whatever I fish for, any little advantage will get you the extra fish. Or it'll help them hold on. Or like I said, to get them to follow it in or just to find out if there's fish there.
Do you fish any crankbaits?
Yes, I fish crankbaits. That's again the time of year.
Yeah.
In the fall, like for largemouth bass and stuff like that. And I'll fish a big crank, like the divers you're talking about, or like square bills. Square bills are usually summer. The deep diver ones, the Rapala DT6s and whatever, is usually in the fall. I use those heavy in the fall because that's where they are. They're down. Actually, because I know there were times where I'm fishing the jerkbait, and I don't want to switch to say the X-Wrap, but I want something that's digging down on the bottom. That's when I use the divers, deeper divers.
So I never really used crankbaits up until I met my friend Scott Wilson. Giving Scott a shout out. Find him at the Columbus Fishing Expo this weekend. He loves crankbaits. And I told him, I never really catch anything. And he says, maybe you're not reeling them fast enough. And he gave me this advice, is that if you reel in the crankbait as fast as you can, and if you're not catching anything, reel it in even faster than that. So I took that advice, and sure enough, I started to consistently land fish on crankbaits. But traditionally, I would approach a big body of water, big open body of water, and I would think, I would probably always throw a jerkbait in that situation over a crankbait.
Oh, me too, yeah. But there are times, there are times where you'll catch them both ways. I mean, there are times where I fish like in the summer, like for smallmouth, right? Yeah. And I know a rattle trap will destroy them. But if I know if they're in the area, I'd rather catch four big ones on a top water than 10 fish using a rattle trap. Because to me, it's more exciting.
Yeah.
I've had smallmouth physically. I'm jerking my I use the head and spitting image.
Okay.
And again with scent, I'll jerk it. Big rattle, makes a lot of noise. It's not like those prop baits. What do you call those things? With the propeller on the back and all that stuff.
The Whopper Plopper?
Yeah, those are good. They catch fish, but this I like better. It's more finesse, and also I like you're leaving it in the zone more, and then it's exuding the gel scent, and I'm jerking it, making it jump. They'll come up under it and not bite it. I've had it where they've hit it. The lure has gone straight up in the air. And the first time that happened to me years ago, I pulled it and then the lure came flying back at me. I'm going, what the? I didn't know what happened.
Yeah.
I didn't believe a fish could do that. So when the next test I threw it out there, it happened again. And what they do is they'll hit it to stun it and then eat it. So I let it fall back in the water, and a big smallmouth ate it, about 6-pounder.
So I really don't fish for bass in rivers. I go toward larger lakes and reservoirs. But I will tell you, the number one bait that I put scent on are topwater frogs. And I know it makes a difference. I know I have fished in the past, haven't gotten a bite for 5, 10, 15 minutes. I put scent on, and immediately I get attention from really big bass. And you're right, sometimes they do come up to strike it and stun it, so you don't want to set the hook right away. But I will tell everybody, if you're fishing a topwater frog, especially through heavy vegetation, moss, stuff like that, definitely add scent.
Absolutely, 100%. See, the whole game is, it's like me. I'm a fat guy, right? I like to eat, right? Everybody likes to eat. Fat guys like to eat more. So meaning like fat guy, like a big fat fish. Mm-hmm. When you get more, like I said, like I'll see a pizza on TV. I want to eat pizza. But if I smell a pizza and they put it down in front of me, what am I going to do? I'm going to eat it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the reaction. It's all of the senses involved. The violent jerks or the noise causes the reaction. and the reaction will get you a bite. I have a hashtag. It's called "Fish it right, get a bite." If any lure, even cheap lures, you can buy a cheap lure. If you know how to work a lure, you can get it to catch fish. Some lures work better than the others. I mean, mainly I'll use the Rapalis, but there are other lures that I use in different situations. But you can use any lure. If you know how to work it to how they want it, you'll get it to work.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And quick shout out to American Tackle. They really make an awesome jerkbait.
Actually, I love those too. But again, time of year. The American Tackle ones, I'll cast out there. And they're heavy. They go a mile. But if I want to hit a zone where I see them killing bait way on the other side, I'll cast. I'll prime time my cast upriver or up creek to let the flow, and I'll let it flow and let it take it down to where I get to the zone.
So let's switch it up real fast. I see that you fish in a lot of rivers. I typically don't unless I'm fishing for steelhead. So how do you overcome some of the obstacles you face when fishing from the river? On the shore, current, water conditions, there's a lot of debris in the water to get snagged on.
Well, you learn to read the water. If you look at the water on rivers and creeks or whatever, of moving water, and you'll see on the surface the differences of the ripple and the pockets. You'll see where there's, say, boulders. You fish rivers. Mm. You'll see that, and then you just fish it accordingly. Like I'll cast up above the pocket that I want to hit, that I know it's going to float down to, like that. But you've got to read the water, and that comes from experience. And then that's all part of the game. You watch where the tidal pools are. You can see where the differences of the water is.
All right, good stuff. So this is what I call rapid fire, and I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, and let's just apply this overall to bass fishing. And I love this segment because I could ask these questions to 10 different people and I would get 10 different answers because everybody fishes differently. So it's kind of fascinating to me. So the first question would be, if you had a preference, spinning or bait casting rod?
Spinning.
Simple enough. All right. If you had to walk down to a new body of water that you've never fished before, you can only take 3 baits. What 3 baits are you taking with you?
Jerkbait, rubber worm, and a spinnerbait.
Okay, I'm curious. What kind of plastic worm?
Plastic worm. I mean, you can't beat a Senko, but the worms American Tackle has are pretty good too.
Yeah.
Depending, I use them wacky style. They cast a mile. Same thing.
All right, next one here. If you had a preference, lake, river, pond, or ocean fishing?
Oh, that's a hard one. I fish them all.
Yeah.
But if I only had to pick one, I would pick the river.
Really?
I'm a river guy. I know how to fish rivers.
Okay, braid, mono, or fluoro?
That's a tough one. I fish braid, but I tip it with fluoro.
All right, so you think that makes a difference?
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. You want me to tell you why?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they can see the braid. I know they can see the braid.
All right.
Depending on water clarity. Or here. It's in my head that they could see it. So if it's in my head, that's the game.
Okay, that makes sense. What's one thing that you always take fishing with you that's not tackle, but you always bring it along?
My phone to take pictures.
That's too easy. Give us a better one.
All right. My grippers, since I fish with a lot of toothy critters.
All right, last one here. What's one fishing tip that you can give somebody that you've learned from years of fishing that they can't find in maybe a magazine or somewhere online, something that you learned yourself that you can share?
Okay, here. The main thing is persistent and paying attention. You have to figure it out through doing it. Like a jerkbait, right?
Yeah.
The main thing I tell people when I'm showing them how to use a jerkbait, is when you bring it back in, after the jerks, you don't jerk on a tight, or even I jerk. You should see the slack in my line when I'm doing a jerk bait. It's insane.
Yeah.
But it allows the bait to move the way it was meant to move. If it's not moving the way it was, they're not going to bite it.
All right. So I don't want to get you all riled up here, but I did meet you down at ICAST. So if there's somebody listening that wants to go to ICAST and has never been to ICAST, kind of give a quick plug on why you should go to ICAST at least once.
Because it's better than Christmas. I mean, it is the holy grail of what we love to do.
Yeah, the networking opportunities you can make, the friendships, just being around that environment, so many like-minded people. Can you share a couple of some of your favorite moments from going to ICAST over the years?
Oh, I like meeting some of my idols. Like talking to Kevin Van Dam about jerkbait fishing. That was, because he is the man. Kevin, you want to learn how to use a jerkbait correctly? Find a video of his about jerkbaits online. Yeah. Because Kevin Van Dam is the man. I pattern a lot of my stuff and I modified it, but it's all from him.
Yeah.
And getting to talk to him in person about it was like awesome.
No, I think that's awesome that you brought up KVD. I actually did meet him too last year. It was pretty awesome. I talked to him about winning the Bassmaster Classic in Pittsburgh. I was able to go to that show. That was awesome. I also met Bill Dance on the elevator, which was kind of cool. I told that story in an older podcast. But I have this question wrote down. I'm glad that we have time to get to this. So, over the years, what do you think the impact social media is having on the fishing industry?
It's 90% good. I mean, you got some bad, but without social media, I mean, fishing is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry now. Everybody and their mother's making lures and line, and you see how many companies are out there. But a lot of people, like guys like us, how do you think we promote the cause? Oh, I post across all platforms. I mean, there's so many now.
There is.
But it helps grow even more. I mean, it's just knowledge. Just knowledge alone to get people, with COVID, as a matter of fact, right? Everybody's stuck home, COVID, right?
Yeah.
Well, everybody and their mother who never fished before wanted to fish. And what are they doing? They're looking on the internet. They're all looking, oh, I'm watching YouTube videos. Oh, look, this is how you can do this. It grew the sport.
I have really developed a lot of good relationships through social media. And when you kind of gear everything toward, your interests, it doesn't need to be just fishing. Any really interest that you have, you're just surround yourself with like-minded people. So I think it's a positive thing. I also think that it really gives smaller companies, startup companies, a voice, which is really needed. Before, you're competing with everything that you see on a national level. Now smaller companies do kind of have a counter. But on the flip side, now every startup company, every small bait company is out there. So that drives your competition through the roof. Now you're competing against all the large guys and the small guys.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. I mean, I don't do YouTube videos because there's 5 billion guys that do fishing YouTube videos. And to me, I can't fight in that market. I like to, number one, I love to fish. And that, doing the video part takes away from that. Plus, you get lost in like a giant stew of 10 million guys who want to do what we do.
Yeah.
And there's so much content, it's really not worth it because you get lost unless you're a bigger name. I mean, like, I know guys like Alberto, unless you have a TV show. Like Lunkerville, that's a cool show. That guy, as a matter of fact, Mike Davila, he's got a cool show. That's different. Like guys posting content Like I'll post videos, but I won't post to YouTube. I'll post it in Instagram, you know, the short clips.
Yeah.
That makes a difference. But the other stuff is just, there's too much. And like, I used to do Twitter. I'm my presence on Twitter is limited now because again, that became like political, all this kind of crap. So, I mean, I'll still post it there once in a while, but my main ones are Facebook and Instagram, and like the millions of groups that I get added to.
So how can people find you and follow you on social media?
On Instagram, it's wong.gen at Instagram, and on Facebook is Gen Wong on Facebook.
Perfect.
Yeah, easy peasy, man.
That's awesome. So we're running out of time here. Is there anything else you want to bring up?
I think that's about it, man. We got to get fishing. You got to come down here to Jersey if you want, fish with me. I got to go up there to Ohio. Actually, I got invites to go everywhere. Florida. I'm supposed to go up to Rhode Island. Actually, do you know Marion, what's his name? Marion Graves? He's a co-stepper as well.
Yeah, I met him at ICAST.
Yeah, he's from Ohio. I'm surprised you guys didn't know each other.
Yeah, I'm friends with him now on Facebook, but I did meet him for the first time down at ICAST. Yeah, he's an awesome guy. I think he's actually working down in Florida now for American Tackle. Yeah,
he's in the office now. He moved down there, and he's in the office.
Well, he's an awesome guy. He definitely deserves it, so I'm happy for him. Again, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Let's all give it up for Gen Wong. Thank you for taking the time, my friend.
Oh, I appreciate talking to you, man. What's better than talking about fishing other than fishing itself?